Rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Kim Otadi, Deputy Clerk, is here. Kim, would you call the roll?
Yes. Supervisor Schneiderman.
Here.
Councilwoman McNamara.
Here.
Councilman Martell.
Here.
Councilman Bouvier.
Here.
And Councilman Scivone.
Councilman Scivone has an excused absence from today's meeting. So there's four of us, which is more than a quorum. So we can begin, and our conversation this morning will start with Hampton Bays in the downtown business district. We are joined by Janice Shearer, our Town Planning and Development Administrator, as well as Paul Knight from Historical Concepts and Elizabeth Dillon from Historical Concepts. And so we have contracted with Historical Concepts to develop a new ideas for revitalizing downtown Hampton Bays, and that's their expertise. Janice, I'll turn things over to you, and you can take it from there.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor and Board, for having us back. It's been a long journey, but we are still at it, and we're just trying to get some understanding of where you want to go, and get some resolution and clarity in terms of the downtown of Hampton Bays. It's a hot topic. It's a upsetting topic to many, but it is just a planning topic. I mean, we're just trying to understand how we're going to move forward, and that is up to you, this board. In 2022, you signed a contract with Historical Concepts to gather the information you gave them after the listening sessions, to look at the online community survey that you did, and to just go through plainly, without my input, without anyone's input, developer or anyone, just look at it in terms of just good planning, just setting down principles and practices of good planning. And I'm just going to turn it over to Paul and Elizabeth, because they've done a lot of work. They did the pattern book. The pattern book was a way of new development, having a guideline to hold new development up against, and so decisions are not arbitrary, and to be able to say, well, if you want to build a building like this, these are the patterns and proportions that are appropriate. And that's what the pattern book did. So it enumerated many styles, and in the context of its area, good ground, and historic Hampton Bays, what future buildings would look like. The pattern book is still an important document. It kind of got cast out, like baby with the bathwater type of thing. I still think it's important in terms of current planning and reviewing things. Part of what we thought initially was we would update the pattern book to take out the things that, were not appropriate or upsetting, the idea that there would be more than 3 stories, which there wasn't, but whatever, setbacks, etc. So the form-based code and all of that have been annulled, the pattern book with it. We're just trying to understand, are we keeping the pattern book? It's all gone. What do you want to do in this very important 10-acre area between Main Street and Good Ground Park? So with that, I will turn it over to Paul, who's also a professor, right, Paul?
I am, yes. Or I was. I taught history of urban form at Georgia Tech for a year. So.
Oh, okay. But it's kind of nice because we get that academic side embedded into this process, into the design process. So I really like that. So, Paul.
Yeah.
Well, and Elizabeth, please,
add a
please,
little
thank you.
general first. So, Janice alluded to when we did the pattern book back in 2016, 2017, we had done some public outreach at that point, met with stakeholders in the hamlet of Hampton Bays, public meetings, online surveys. So we had gathered feedback on what the residents of Hampton Bays wanted to see in terms of future development. Excuse me. As Janice mentioned, a part of that was what we call a visual preference survey, where we look at photographs of local towns, all over the country, of what they like, what they don't like, and we synthesize all of that information along with our professional planning expertise, obviously, but really taking the directive from the residents of Hampton Bays themselves of what they wanted to see. there was overwhelming consensus that they wanted a vibrant, walkable, mixed-use, generally traditional in form village business district. So that was kind of our directive that we used to develop the pattern book initially, and okay, these are the photographs you like, this is what we're hearing from the residents, here is kind of how you actually, from a technical design standpoint, get there. Some guidelines for how to make sure that development was consistent with what we heard from the residents. So when we were re-engaged in 2022, we pulled out kind of all of that data gathering that we had done previously, the results from the survey, what we'd heard from the public meetings. We took the notes from your listening tour and kind of the updated notes, but we really didn't hear anything that was inconsistent with what we had heard back in 2016 and 2017. And it seems like the residents have been pretty consistent in what they're asking
Yeah,
for.
let me just add to that too, because, we did do this survey, we mailed to everyone. Of course, it did have like a QR code that brought them to an online survey, so we have all that data and
Yep.
had a lot of participation in it. And then I did, I think, 4 big listening sessions, every Thursday. And there were a lot of people that went on for a long time. And then I did focus groups as well in Hampton Bays. And there was overwhelming, people do want revitalization. They
Yeah.
do want investment into downtown. They want that vibrancy. The questions about, managing traffic or density, how many units, who the apartments would be for, or the heights of buildings, what sort of goes where. Those things were, reflected in those listening sessions. But I'm concurring with what you're saying, that there was an overwhelming consensus in the community toward doing something, not
Yeah.
doing nothing.
Yeah, we had a lot of positive feedback when we were kind of doing the initial
Yeah.
outreach.
There are
And then,
some
like
who
you're
don't
saying-
want anything, who love it just the way
Yes.
just the way it is, but the bulk of the population clearly wants some positive changes that adds
Yeah.
vitality to the community.
Yeah,
And we did as part of their look at this, they also did what as of right development is permitted today. So there was some
yeah,
obvious concern that there could be real just big box commercial to some extent down there, and
Under current
that is
zoning.
under current zoning, and that's not necessarily consistent with the park and
Exactly.
how we initially envisioned it, even in the original
Right.
comp plan.
yep.
Yeah, that's the
And s-
risk of doing nothing, is eventually you get investment based on current zoning, which is not aligned in any way with the community's vision for its
Yeah.
downtown.
Exactly, and so that's
It's
what,
strip mall
when we were
development.
re-engaged about a year ago, that's where we started, okay,
Can I
looking at
just-
what could be done now,
I
is
said
that
one other
consistent?
little piece that, from those listening sessions, because when we would talk about downtown Southampton Village or downtown Sag Harbor, which is often referred to as sort of like the iconic downtown, or even places like Patchogue or Sayville, people would say they didn't want to be they didn't want to be Sag Harbor, they
Yeah.
didn't want to be Southampton Village, they wanted to have their own unique community character. They wanted to be Hampton Bays.
Of course,
Sort of like a natural evolution of what they had been, over time.
Yeah.
And, not to be a replica of some other community.
Yeah.
And more, I think, a little bit more working class in its, more salt of the earth in
Yeah.
a way. Not that those places aren't, great places, but,
yeah,
Yeah.
but embracing the year-round residents, making
Yeah.
sure that it feels like an authentic place.
authentic, yes.
And so that's, so we started with all of that in mind, obviously with good planning and professional principles in mind as well, and wanting to build on what the town has, all of the assets that Hamlet has right now, and especially Good Ground Park, being a really wonderful asset that the town has invested in recently. Making sure that the whole Village Business District area really is a place that the residents want to be and can engage and find community. And so we have this most recent exercise we've been doing, and what we're here with today is, we are just trying to create some visuals of what possible future development could look like, that we think is in keeping with what we've heard from the residents with the listening tour, that we think is consistent with, the precedent of the kind of good planning in the region that we've studied in the other towns and villages that the supervisor mentioned, and how that might apply to the specific place of Hampton Bays. So Paul's going to walk you through our process and some of the visuals of what potential future development could look like.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
I'll put my professor hat on and go over here to the lectern.
Yeah, you might have to
Are
pull
you
that
gonna
mic
speak?
over.
Yes.
Oh.
Is this the mic?
Yeah.
So this is our, the area that we're looking at. This is Montauk Highway and Good Ground Park to the north here. So we're focused on this area of development potential between the two. And so when we first are wanting to introduce ourselves to a town or to study other hamlets and villages, we kind of take an X-ray of it. And so we just look at the property lines, the streets and blocks, and then building footprints. And this allows us to kind of just study this quote-unquote skeletal nature of the town to see like what are the bones that we're working with here. And just based on that little bit of information, there's a lot that we can glean from it. So even if I'd never have been to Hampton Bays before, just based on this diagram, I can look and see, oh, okay, well, this is probably where Main Street is. And there's because of all these missing teeth along Montauk Highway here, Main Street kind of, peters out along this section here, but the main part of Main Street is along here where you've got that street wall. And I can look at these buildings and see that a lot of these are oriented toward the streets, but none are really oriented toward the park. And this park is way back here because these lots are really deep, 600-foot deep lots. And there are very few things that we build that need a 600-foot lot. Most things only need a 120-foot lot. And so based on this kind of initial blush analysis, we start developing notes on, okay, how do we kind of rectify some of these things? So for example, we want to have frontage on the park. So we want to either turn some of the buildings around, or if we can't do that, then create lots in such a way that you can create frontage to front the park, because you want to have like eyes on the street and eyes on the park and have activity on the park. We want to, consider filling in some of these missing teeth to continue that street wall along Montauk so that you get that outdoor room feel and that vibrancy of having walkability there along your main street. Considering adding new streets and creating smaller blocks to induce that kind of walkability. And so once we kind of have this first blush at things, we then take a tub of whiteout and just throw it over our study area, and that allows us to kind of look at it with fresh eyes. And so we've got our whiteout here, and then we think, okay, what might we need to do in order to check all those boxes that we just identified? And so we might come up with something like this, but there's a million different ways to do it. But this gets us our lot orientations and our small blocks, and we're oriented to the park, et cetera, et cetera. So then, with that as an underlay, we can now look at it with more of a, okay, what kind of property are we actually studying right now? And so it's this, we're looking at this kind of wonky property line here that if you just looked at it in and of itself, it'd be hard to see, what could you do with that? But by having this underlay of what is a good town or village plan underneath it, you can start to kind of develop some ideas off of that and be like, oh, okay, well, if the street's under here, what if we had a street there? Or if we're wanting a street there, what if there was one there? And then what if the lots were oriented to the park, et cetera, et cetera. So you can develop a number of different plans that fit within your study area that you're looking at. And so then, if you you're like, all right, well, this is a pretty good plan, let's refine that a little bit. and throw in some building footprints to see, how that kind of intersects with all the existing buildings. And you can do a post-analysis to make sure you're still checking all those boxes that we identified before, making sure we're capitalizing on Main Street and that park, creating that vibrancy and that walkability. And you can also ground truth it relative to other hamlets and villages. Previously, we did an extensive study of various Long Island hamlets and villages, looking at their streets and blocks, and this is called a NOLI plan, where you kind of look at the buildings as black and then everything else as white, so you can see what is the density of buildings. And so from all of that analysis and process, we then come up with this potential plan for that area between Montauk Highway and Good Ground Park. And so this plan really extends that idea of walkability and vibrancy. It physically connects your main street to the park, so that, all those, if you buy an ice cream at the corner shop here, you can take that with your kids and walk up to the park and they can play in the park, and you're parking here in the back, and so everything is very connected and permeable, very vibrant. And this is how the plan shakes out in terms of program. So again, this is just kind of an initial blush at what the square footages could work out to be. But overall, we're looking at 145,000 square feet of ground floor, and then the buildings modulate between 1 to 2 floors. So if, on average, we've got about 145,000 square feet, about the same amount up on the second floor. So then in total, a little less than 300,000 square feet. And that's a mixture of ground floor retail, second floor office, 160 residential units, and then back here and along this area as well, we have enough room for 480 parking spaces to accommodate all those new uses.
Is that all off-street, Paul, or does that include on-street?
That includes the on-street, so we are indicating some on-street parking. It's actually not much on-street parking. I didn't count the parking along the park up here, so that number mostly is the internal to the block parking here and over here. And so again, always going back to those principles of good town planning, and making sure that we're checking all those boxes. And so making sure that this red zone here is kind of our quote-unquote front door zone, where we want to have the front doors and the front windows and everything along there, so that our streets are these vibrant, walkable things, and the park is activated with all these shops and houses. And again, makes a vibrancy there, and also it's good for safety, having those eyes on the street, everybody looking out for everybody else. But then also wanting to make sure that if these streets are connected through, but if you didn't want that connection, that vehicular connection to be there one day, then you could still have these temporary bollards in these strategic locations. But the alley back here is essentially a two-way drive that can still allow for continuous traffic flow if you, for whatever reason, don't want to connect to the park road. And so ground truthing some of these dimensions that we're showing. This is a street section of one of these new streets we're showing here. And given the distance within our study area from the east to west there, we've got about 240 feet to play with. And that's plenty of space to have two 60-foot deep rows of buildings. You've got your main street here with one side with on-street parking, and then you can even line these alleys on either side with angled parking if you want, or it could be a two-way alley. There's a lot of flexibility there. And so then this is looking at one of those new streets, kind of an elevated window view, lined with shops. You can have like little internal parks in between the buildings. This is terminating onto Good Ground Park in the back here. So it kind of extends the town of Hampton Bays to the park. And this is a view from the park, looking back at this potential development. 1 to 2 story buildings. You've got your coffee shop here, and you're sitting out there on a sunny day, and then comparing this whole area to Sayville, just as for sake of comparison. Sayville has, within this rectangle, which is 26 acres, has 3.2 buildings per acre, and we're showing in this potential plan 2.7 buildings per acre. So it's a little less dense than Sayville.
So that's just
And that's my lecture.
our first stab at what we think would be, appropriate development for Hampton Bays, but that also meets what we've heard from the residents. So this was just trying to give everybody a visual that could be an example of an end goal to work towards.
Can I just, on the number of stories, well, you were just talking about 1 and 2 stories, but you also, like, you have 2.5 story, like I'm looking at the drawing, so that's a combination. Some buildings are definitely 2.5 stories, right?
Yes.
But it looks like on average, most of the buildings look to be about 2 stories, with maybe some 1-story buildings.
Yeah, on
mixed in.
average, it's mostly 2, with some 1 story and then some 2.5
But
story
you
in there.
didn't use any 3-story buildings, and certainly no 4-story buildings.
Correct, yeah, there are no 3-story and definitely no 4-story.
And then you've got, because I know that was one of the points of dispute, a number of stories. Nobody objected to 2, even 2.5 stories. There were, some people objected to too many 3-story buildings, but you're not showing any. And then, and nobody wanted 4-story buildings.
Right, correct.
So, okay.
So this is really just a starting point to at least have something to go on, and then, to be able to have further discussions and further refinement is obviously the goal, not to say, this is it, here it is. It's just, so what would you recommend?
Right.
This is what they've done, and,
Now, is this something that we can get to the community where we can start to gauge response? I mean, I personally think it looks great. I think it seems to capture to me what the community was expressing they wanted in terms of their downtown, that vibrancy, walkability, wide sidewalks, outdoor cafes, things like that.
and Montauk Highway remaining largely the same.
Montauk
Not
Highway
any
remains the
difference.
same, and you have the ability here to not have to drive through downtown. You can actually pull off, park, spend your day downtown, walking around.
Yeah.
And then go back without having driven through the center of downtown. Whether you're coming from the east or west, it doesn't matter, because you have these 2 streets. So I don't know if, in terms of traffic lights, you're probably envisioning a traffic light at this intersection, but maybe not the other one, might be just right out, right in, right out, sort of thing. And you're not showing a connection to Cemetery Road, which I understand that may be complicated to get to Cemetery Road, but there's a light at Cemetery Road. In the future, that might provide another way to, make a left into this community without driving through downtown. If you could, you're coming from the west, turn at Cemetery Road and somehow
Yeah.
find your
This
way
is really
through.
just the start of kind of creating that network. It could easily be expanded in the future.
The other thing I just want to bring up is the original zoning plan for downtown Hampton Bays included a wider area than this, right? It included areas north of Montauk Highway to the east of this. It included the other side of Montauk Highway
Yeah.
all the way to the train station. So I guess this is sort of a phase one.
So this was a simple, you're right, so the larger study area, for the downtown district originally, was the larger area with the yellow outline. And just for the sake of this exercise to show what, future development could look like, we wanted to use the northern portion because there is more, available land, quite
space,
frankly,
and-
open space that we
And you
kept
have-
all of these existing buildings, and we really were just able to add and work with open space. So we thought that that would be an easier first phase to
I think
illustrate.
on the south side of the highway too, I don't know how many property owners have expressed an interest in redeveloping their properties, where you do have property owners in this section that are interested in investing and redeveloping or developing some of this space. So I also noticed this new street, in your earlier, one of your drawings, you have it a little bit further to the east, and then you shifted it a little bit ultimately. And I guess that relates to the willingness of property owners, or, I'm not, can you just maybe explain that? Do you know, Paul?
That was kind of the exercise of starting with the ideal plan and
The
then
ideal
tweaking
plan.
it to work within the
Tweaked
property
it.
lines.
Right, yeah.
It shifted a little bit.
Yeah, I
I
think
don't
that
mind it
was
in the
just-
location that you ended up, I think. It's kind of brings the street closer to the center of Good Ground Park,
Right.
which maybe is a better location for it. And also, I think if there's gonna be a light there, it's more centered on the other two lights. Because you have a light at Good Ground, a light at the Cemetery Road, and then you have a light at Ponquag Squiretown Road. So shifting it a little further from the light maybe makes sense. Okay. So again, in terms of bringing this to the public and getting some input, I know there's been one person who's been critical of my saying that I'd like to do it in small groups rather than one giant session. And to me, it's really just because I think people are more comfortable sometimes speaking in a more, intimate setting and sharing. Some people get intimidated and don't want to share. They think that maybe their ideas will be criticized. And there's nothing anybody can say that's wrong. Yeah, people are entitled to their opinion. We want to reflect what the community wants, not just what the loudest voices want. So I think that, we should do both. I mean, we should let's get community response to this. And, first town board response. If the town board is uncomfortable with it, then we make some changes. And if it's too much density or whatever, we trim it back. Or other aspects are, not meeting the board's favor, then we can change it. But then maybe we can do some settings, smaller settings, and then a larger setting, is what I'm thinking. And if the community, let's just say hypothetically, there's a large consensus toward this development in this area. I guess two things have to happen. One is we'd have to put the zoning in place, whether it's through an overlay or whatever, we'd have to write a code, because you can't do this under current zoning, right? So you'd have to put zoning in place that would allow this type of development, maybe, focused on a very specific plan that the community has endorsed, saying, yes, to the private sector, we will give you what it takes zoning-wise to enact this specific plan, or within a window of variability, right? But this would be what the community wants. I think the other piece of it, since these are private properties and there are multiple owners here, we would want to know whether the private sector had any interest in executing such a plan.
Right.
If the private sector says, oh, that's lovely, but I have no interest in doing that I'm going to make more money building, my furniture store or my car dealership or, you know, whatever it is, you know, my CVS, whatever they want to build, then, you know, we've done a really great exercise that's gone nowhere. So I think at some point, we do have to have a conversation with property owners to say, is this something you're interested in? Because, you know, if not, great plan, goes nowhere, right? But I think the way the board's been approaching it is, let's figure out first what the community wants, not what the developers want. Figure out what the community wants and see if we can then reconcile with, you know, the private sector and make something happen, rather than having downtown languish or get developed in a pattern that nobody wants. Because that's the only viable economic option. So I've said quite a bit. Let me turn it over to my colleagues. So,
Do you have any
Rick?
breakdown on the residential, the 160 units, like how many are one bedroom, two bedroom, three bedroom, anything like that?
No, we were using 1,290 square foot gross per unit, just to give us a rough overall number, but we didn't look at the 3, 2, or 1 bedroom counts.
Typically, you have like 80% is a two-bedroom, 10 to 20%.
You can
Yeah.
organize it any way you want, or you
Yeah.
can say it's too much or too little,
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah, 'cause we, you know, we did not do a full building
They just-
design.
Right,
So
right.
it's kind of a sample program, like you're saying. I think you could take the distribution.
Do you have some buildings that are wholly residential, or is everything mixed?
Yeah, some of these, like some of the ones that have the narrower width, like we were seeing those as
Park here.
in here as kind of like townhouses.
Yeah, and you can see just, you know, because the breakdown of the square footage, ground floor is 145,000 square feet, but then you have the ground floor retail is only 55,000 square feet. So you could, you know, the balance would be
Which isn't
something other than retail.
That far off from the fees, the big box was 139,000 square feet as of right, potentially.
Mhm.
So it's not that far different.
Janice,
It
did you
sounds like a large
analyze-
number,
Yeah,
but when
right,
you
Yeah.
hear
right.
it in context of,
Did you analyze as of right, under current zoning, what the residential density in this area is versus this plan?
I did bring the GEIS with me initially. I feel like it was around 108 or something.
So this
like
is maybe 50 or 60 units more than current zoning
that. Correct.
in terms of housing density. But Good Ground Park itself, I think, had 80 houses that could have gone there before the town acquired it, so.
That's right. So all the hard work was already done when you preserved 38 acres in the downtown.
Yeah.
And the community at that time said, we don't want that level of density. So now you're just really dealing with the last 10 acres that is,
So
you
this is
know.
like an additional 50 or 60 housing units above
Right.
current zoning.
Yeah, so when we had looked, you know, almost a year ago, when we were here looking at kind of what's permitted as of right, one of the scenarios we looked at was as senior citizen housing units, and we saw 122 units were allowable in the same area.
In the same
under
area
the senior citizen
of
housing.
senior citizen
Yeah.
housing.
right, which obviously we want a mix
mix.
of, you know, you want
Yeah,
young
but that was just the number.
people to be able to
Right.
live here too.
Right, so that's only maybe 40 units more than that scenario.
So anyway, you rebuttal.
Parking or service, yeah, it's kind of that, all the back of house stuff would be
Okay.
interior to the
And you
block.
didn't include any of Good Ground?
No, I didn't count that.
Thank you.
The parking is definitely needed in this area.
Hmm. Yeah, you had the 2 municipal lots, right? One sort of where.
Potential, but you
Mhm,
didn't
yes.
count it as parking.
I counted both,
Oh, you did.
both of these areas here and here.
And obviously, none of this can happen without sewage treatment.
Well, that's the other thing. So you sort of have to come to some sense of what is the number, whatever you're willing to zone this for, because we can't really design the sanitary system without knowing what you want to do here. So it sits in a holding pattern until they have a sense of what you're doing. And, you know, so it would be great if we could just at least get closer to a consensus on whatever you want to do based on whatever.
So I'm sorry, I think
Your
you
constituents want.
answered this already, but take away what was saved in Good Ground Park, what could you build here now, not counting what we had already preserved?
120 senior, right?
You know, they did
These
that.
are the
Yeah.
Little design
Oh,
scenarios.
108 residential.
Their scenario one was the big box sort of retail, and you can see, and I could put that up on the screen if you
Yeah,
want.
so,
I
right,
have
the
that.
scenario one is
No.
139,000 square feet of, single family, single story, single use retail, the commercial, and kind of more in big box store and parking lots. So it's 139,000 square feet. And then we've looked at these two alternate scenarios. Scenario two here is the senior housing, which would be 122 units. And then we did have some, in addition to that, some single-story retail, 64,000 square feet of retail with the 122 senior housing units. Scenario three at the bottom there was 66 apartments and 72,000 square feet of retail.
Thank you.
Now, that may include an additional parcel though to the east. We can look at that.
Same
feel like-
scenario, I think we,
We added this portion here later
oh
on.
yeah, in the center. So those were not showing anything in the center.
Yeah.
Okay,
So in the current area, we kind of connected the development
Right.
across this street.
but those those two lots to the right in your analysis.
I think those are incorporated in here.
Yeah, it looks
Okay.
like it's the same boundaries.
Mhm.
Okay. Looked like it may have gone a little further east.
To do the overlay, it might have looked just one lot.
Oh, yeah,
There's
like
the
maybe,
current-
maybe
yeah.
we originally had one of these
That's what
lots, but
Yeah,
I'm
no,
thinking,
you're
so
right.
that might
Yeah.
skew the numbers slightly,
Yeah.
but.
yeah,
No, you're right.
yeah, it's not like a apples to apples.
But
exactly.
either way, it's not tremendous in terms of, in terms of residential density, it's relatively close to the as-of-right residential density.
Mhm.
Because I know that's one of the things that people express concern about,
Yeah.
and that as-of-right residential density, some of it could be in the form of houses, like four-bedroom houses and things like that, so it's hard to really say what the population. This is more based on smaller units, couples or small families, right? Individuals, things like that.
There's a ratio of retail and what it requires to survive
Mhm.
on density, right? And I think this meets that pretty well. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yeah, I don't know what that, number is.
He's talking about like the foot traffic for retail.
Right.
Yeah, to support retail so that they have a viable business.
Mhm.
One of
Yeah.
the problems I always see is when you try to reduce density so much but increase,
Right.
there's no one to go to
Yeah,
to these.
exactly.
I mean, I think the biggest factor, and that is a big factor, no doubt, to have apartments over the retail. But in terms of like the vibrancy of downtowns, what seems to be successful, because downtowns have changed in this like post-Amazon world where a lot of people are buying things online. It's the wet uses and the culture and the interactions and, that vibrancy, that is what's saving downtowns. And you're having the adequate parking and people can go there and experience a downtown. It's like going out,
Yeah.
Right now Hampton Bays, from the surveys that we've done, people seem to, if they go downtown, it's not that often, and it's to pick up one thing and go.
Yeah.
It's not to experience downtown. Maybe they have an appointment at a, hair salon or whatever it
Yeah.
might be. But this is a downtown where you spend the whole day,
Yeah.
and maybe, I know you guys have not included a performing arts venue or something like that, you haven't got into that level of detail. Hopefully, the movie theater is able to survive and stay, and that could provide that, so. And then, of course, Good Ground Park, which is, the whole thing is centered around a cultural, performing arts outdoor venue.
Yep.
So people go to the park for a concert, and then they stop and have a drink or an ice cream with their kids, or whatever it might be.
Be a consumer to participate in the space.
Right.
Yeah, it's a public asset.
Unless you have little kids who, you know.
Yeah.
So back to the board, does this feel good? Does it feel like we're moving in the right direction? I think it is, based on those listening sessions.
I think we took out the biggest concerns. One was that there wasn't enough parking, another was the 3-story and 4-story buildings. So I think this is a better place to start the conversation. I am concerned about the roads leading into Good Ground Park, but I'm sure that'll come up also.
When
Well,
you
like I said,
created it
there's
as
those
a-
bollards, so you
bollards would have
wouldn't,
to
but
stay,
after
yeah.
maybe an event, you could let people out if you needed a relief valve, you would have it, but
Right.
for the most part, it would stay closed.
Could you, this is something that's come up a number of times, like this new street, this 2-story, let's call it Park Avenue, or 2-sided Park Avenue, where hopefully you'd have a bunch of wet uses, cafes and restaurants and things like that. With this plan, could you, let's say on a Saturday evening, if you wanted to make it pedestrian only, and have like a street fair or kiosks in the street or tables in the street, you could potentially close this section off and allow access, through the park or whatever, through this other street.
Yeah.
That's possible under this plan. So those bollards, when they're in place, that road connection to Good Ground Park could be just pedestrian only. And so the community would have the ability to open it if it wanted to. It also depends on the ability to cross through the fire department piece. There's a 30-foot section in there. And you could potentially, if this road is an asphalt road, that section leading to the park that's primarily pedestrian could have a different surface.
Yeah. Yep.
Could be stamped concrete or something like that, yeah. To distinguish
Yeah,
it.
so it feels more like a pedestrian plaza, like you're saying.
Yeah.
But vehicles can go over it on occasion.
On occasion, yeah. All right, so, John, you've been quiet, did you want to say anything?
No, I think now you go back to the community and see what the reaction is and get the feedback.
All right, so let's
Again.
talk about how
We
we
can talk
go.
about it all day. It's,
Yeah, exactly.
Can this be put on our website? That's the first
Absolutely, it's
step.
there now, actually, I think,
So
usually
that-
before the work session, I asked for the documents to be posted.
So
Okay.
can I get in, can I have it emailed to me so I can send it to Civic and?
It's
CAC
probably
or-
too big, but I'll give you the
Okay.
link,
Okay.
and then you can email it to everyone.
All right, so,
And then, we can have historical concepts attend a meeting
That's
if you
what I'm
want.
thinking.
They have some, sort of à la carte, tasks, and they've largely fulfilled what we've contracted them to do, and this is their deliverable at this point.
yeah,
so-
look, I think it looks really good. This is what I was hoping for, is something that really, the community could see what it might look like and feel like.
there's no building that's really bigger than Duran's or Gators or,
Yeah,
And if you look at the original comp plan, strategic corridor plan done by Ernie Hutton, it actually isn't that far apart you know, when you
Mhm.
really look at the little
Yeah.
building layouts
Really
and
like
what was
this-
in that
The
Cross
kind of
comprehensive
street and
list.
block network really is
The network is
same.
kind of laid out there.
They
It's
just had
very
fewer
similar to what
buildings.
they did. So it's not inconsistent with what was previously in the comp plan.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the biggest buildings are these two on the corner of the new Main Street and on the one near Liaison Hat Shop on the corner of the other street.
Do you
Yeah, we
want
did
us
try
to
to
put this
hit
online as a
corners.
survey and like to capture any commentary after the Civic and CAC see
That's
it?
not
Just
what
get
I'm
it out there.
thinking.
Just get it.
Just put it out there.
I think that we should schedule some meetings with different organizations like Hampton Bays Beautification, the Civic, American Legion. But, you know, I don't want to make you guys go to 10 different meetings.
No, and residents are also welcome to email us their thoughts and concerns about, you know, what their initial reaction is to it, you know? If they can't come to a meeting or something, but they wanna be heard, they can, by all means, send us an email and let us know if they like it or what they don't like about it.
Yeah.
Well, this description's been very useful, and I think it should be part of that, that contact. You know, if people getting something like this, they need to have the narrative to fill in.
We can add
That's
that
important.
too.
Add that narrative
to
so that they know what they're
the,
looking at, because otherwise they're just looking at blocks.
Well, we
and-
can
Yeah.
add sort of maybe a
Mhm.
video or something to our website about, you know, kind of going through the.
That would be,
Right.
I'd
Do the
put
Yes,
that
and
in
then end
context.
with this, where
Yeah.
we're at.
We could do that.
I really like these types of renderings. I'd love more of them. So you have this one looking toward Good Ground Park on this new Park Avenue, and then, and the view from Good Ground Park. But I'd also, you know, well, one I'll note, the one looking toward Good Ground Park on the new street, like, you know, I'm not seeing outdoor dining, which is something that people talk quite a bit about.
Would you want like some kind of like sort of fly-through that they can show it in a model setting, so, you know,
Is that
that's
something
something
you
I
that.
think
can
would be
do?
We
helpful.
do have a SketchUp model that was the base for this, so we could just clean up the
Clean that
SketchUp
up.
model a little bit and create a little video
A little
flyby.
flyby?
Mhm.
That would be awesome.
Yep. we can do that.
Because I think people would then watch the video and get a real sense of what it might look and feel like.
Could add that video
Yeah.
to the end of the description of how you got here.
So we'll do
Yeah.
the thought process thing, and
Yes,
then, and then the new
Yeah.
task, a
Yeah,
new
this-
contractual task would be a type of fly-through and potentially more renderings, if
But
you
I
want.
think it needs to be, one problem that I've always seen with this is that people assume that this
That's
is.
done, yeah.
That is done.
Right.
And that really has to be defined,
This
this
is
is
the
a
starting
starting point, and a really, really, real early starting point. that
Yeah.
All the input changes that, you know, there's a potential and then there is the reality.
Well, you just seriously need something tangible to look at and feel versus just talking about it, because it gets distorted.
People walk
perception,
away
you
Or
with
know?
people go into the minutia of what exact stores and services they want in the buildings.
Yeah.
I mean, you
So
know,
it's-
everybody has their hopes and dreams of what they wanna
Yes.
do in life, and they may say, wow, this is gonna be a storefront,
And I
I
don't
wanna have
think
a,
they
you
understand
know,
that through
shop.
zoning, you can't say like, this has to be a restaurant, and this has to be a clothing store, and this has to be a coffee shop,
Right.
and this has to be a brewery.
But those
Those are
things
all great
happen.
ideas,
Yeah.
and
Right,
they're
that's
definitely wants of the community, but that's beyond where we take this.
Right, well, in a downtown setting, you'll be able to say, you know, all those things are welcome, and then they
Yeah.
sort of come in or naturally, based on
Right.
the fact that there's
Market
these.
conditions
Yeah.
and things like that.
I mean, people were getting into where they wanted the post office relocated to and where they, you know, it's, in an ideal setting, if you could make your dream town and decide exactly what services you want there and who you want there and how you want it laid out, that would be great. But, you know, market dictates a lot of that, so.
Life's a little messier, obviously,
Yeah.
so we
This is
can't
really about
control
creating
the
the
things.
framework,
Yeah.
Right.
that there could be some
Yeah,
sort
it's
of
like a plug and
consistency.
play, like you can
But
put the
then, like you
buildings
said, the
where.
You could
market
want
would
a toy
dictate
store,
what the
but the
use
toy
of each
store
of
might not
these
survive.
buildings
so-
might be.
Well, maybe it would. You know.
Well, you want generalized input as opposed to super specific too, because 100 people will have 300 ideas.
Well, you definitely want, the open space and the park is great,
Yeah,
and at some
exactly.
point,
And
someone is
that's
gonna
what
wanna
I-
go get something to eat.
That's what I like about this.
So
Yeah.
let's, plan for that.
Yeah, I like this because it helps you get to that point without feeling that it's being driven on top of you. This is, again, a starting point. I think that's really critical to get across, that this isn't an imposition, this is a place to get input.
So yeah, an animation that showed really what it might be like to walk this whole loop here, and maybe some aerial, different angles, and seeing the parking area, how things relate to the park, would be super helpful. It doesn't have to, list what each building is, I don't think. These renderings are nice because they leave a lot to the imagination. So with the level of detail there, sometimes gets misconstrued if we don't include it, if it doesn't match the cultural diversity of the community or whatever it might be. So people are like, oh, that's,
It's an
why-
impression, really, and,
Yeah.
and the idea is this the right impression? Does this feel good? And if
Right.
it doesn't, then what is it that needs to change about it so that it does feel good?
Right, yeah, so you guys can figure that out.
Yeah, go, you got 10 minutes.
No, I think you've done, I think this is really nice. I'm really anxious to hear what the community feels about this. But based on the listening sessions, this is very much in line with what people were saying they wanted. They didn't want as much density. They didn't want the 4-story buildings or even 3-story buildings. You've done those things. They wanted more parking. So, you've achieved, I think, quite a bit. I think this is financially viable, but that's just an intuition. It's more than what current zoning is. And so right on its face, to the owners of these properties, they would get potentially more, square footage than they might have had otherwise.
But to be clear, they haven't seen this, and this is our thoughts in the process. This was
Right.
not what the landowners want. We don't even know if they would want to build
They
this,
might
and if they don't
completely
wanna build
reject it.
this, and this is what we wanna see, then they have to sell their property to somebody that wants to build it.
Or develop it according to zoning, which is what we're hoping they don't do.
No, what I'm saying is if we put this zoning in place because this is what we want, if they don't want to do that, then they can sell them
Right,
to somebody who does.
right. Well, they would still have the option of current zoning versus the overlay. That would really mess this plan up, though, if
Yeah.
it was only on some of these parcels and
Well,
not
there's-
on others.
There's
Yes,
probably some ways we can do that, and we can talk through that, once we get some
I
consensus.
think once we have
on how to
community
do that.
consensus, we can
Yeah,
get
don't
the
get ahead of
owners
yourself.
at a table.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
I think that should be part of the stakeholder groups,
Mhm.
the business owners and property owners.
One step ahead.
Yeah, don't you? I think the fact there's a little less retail, a little less mixed use than they originally had on a plan is a good thing, because they were complaining that we might not be able to fill that retail space, and who's gonna be, and we're gonna have open storefronts and all that. And plus, the shot from the park, looking at what they're going to see, takes away a lot of the fear of seeing the backside of, say, a CVS or a loading
Right.
zone, or something we don't wanna see from the park.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because it's important to protect that view from the park and make it beautiful and not just be looking at.
And that was the intent of the park originally. was,
Right.
you
Want
know,
to
try
pull the
to
park
pull-
into,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
you so
good
much.
job.
Thank you.
We'll have them back.
And so we do have to figure out when we're gonna take this on.
Well,
to the
I'll
community.
start by, it'll be online and given to, refer out to the civic and CACs, the beautification and the business property owners, and start with that. And then you can let me know how you wanna conduct
Yeah.
meetings.
Well, once we have
We'll
that
schedule them.
animation too, that's something that we can show to groups, and we could just get their comments. How does this feel? What do you think? Is this what you're hoping for? Is, is this not what you're hoping for?
I think just having these
What do you-
tools and having that is like worth a lot in terms of working through the issues.
Absolutely,
Great.
you know?
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so we're just gonna do a couple quick updates, and then we have executive session on a number of items. So first, let me say that at Southampton Hospital tomorrow, that's October 13th, there's a free adult flu shot clinic. Adults 18 and over, it's at the Parish Memorial Hall. You guys are probably familiar with it because they have the drive-through COVID testing there. That's 235 Herrick Road, and it goes on from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. So if you're looking to get a free flu shot, that's a perfect opportunity. Yesterday, I did another session of Talk of the Town, which with the new mayor of Southampton Village. It went well, so they're just, that's going to be put on the air soon. We got to talk about a lot of the issues, town, village issues, including sewage treatment, park development, and other issues of good governance. And the traffic cones that highway and police have been doing at Canoe Place Road, we are doing it through the end of this week. This is last year, we ended right around this time.
No, last year we ended up November 17th,
We ended up extending it a little bit
till November
to
17th.
another 2 weeks. Yeah, so we can do that. It's
I
up,
would like
it's
to
up to the
extend it at
board.
least into November and see how traffic is, because right now it's still bad.
All right, so, I'm being told by police that we're reaching a point where traffic has calmed down enough that we could suspend the program after this Friday. If that's not the case, we can certainly keep it going.
I would
So
like to at least go through the 31st and see where we're at then.
we might want to see what happens if we suspend it.
I think it's just we're already getting complaints about it, and I mean, I sat in traffic this morning and it was rolling, it was parked on the canal.
All right, let me talk to the police chief and see if we can extend it for 2 more weeks. You're saying, because I was just talking to him yesterday, he felt it was right around mid-October.
It was November 17th, I looked it up.
November 17th?
Mm-hmm.
I
I feel like at least if we could get through the end of
think
October.
we ended it and then brought it back.
We did, because people complained.
Yeah, all right, so let me talk to the police chief about that. So you're thinking, again, mid-November rather than mid-October?
Yes. we
Okay.
could.
And then, the first public hearing on the 24 preliminary budget is scheduled for Tuesday, 6 PM. That budget, by the way, does include some money for police and highway for, doing these types of things with the cones. Includes an additional 4 police officers, but it also includes a special funding source for traffic mitigation. So that's 6 PM, first public hearing on the 24 preliminary budget. And then that will be hybrid, and so you can access it remotely. And the preliminary budget is up on the town's website, if you want to view it. I did, Councilman Scavone and I both were at a service related to support for Israel that was held yesterday in East Hampton. It's very moving. And, that's obviously a situation that we're going to monitor. There's many people in our community who have loved ones in Israel right now. And, they're a close ally nation, and it's certainly something that we all should be paying attention to. And, anything else update-wise?
I do have a couple from the Youth Bureau real quick if I can. They have a few new programs that they wanted us to mention. The 2 R's for Fun is a collaboration between East End Arts and the Youth Bureau. The mentoring program matches adults with youth in grades 3 and 4. A book is shared between the mentors and the mentees where they are encouraged to write what they are reading about. And it goes on, but I'll skip through them. One other new program is boxing, offered through the Youth Bureau this year. Walter Brown, who is a veteran, teaches this non-contact sport. So, and has offered to work with the Youth Bureau for a very low fee. And the kids are really enjoying that program. They've also teamed up with the Southampton Cultural Center in offering teen entrepreneurial program. This program matches up adults, businesses, and the youth to culminate in programs. They're going to mark it on November 25th in the Southampton Village at the tree lighting ceremony. And the last one is storytelling in a new journalism program for elementary students in the Youth Bureau. It's running at SYS and the Kids Club program on Monday afternoons. The program teaches young students how to listen and retell a story in their own words. This builds listening skills, creativity, and verbal expression, and that's something I wish every student would take care of. And on another note, San Gennaro is canceled this weekend. It's rescheduled for October 28th and 29th. If for whatever reason that doesn't happen, it is canceled for 2023.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
So more bad weather.
More bad weather. We've had 5 weekends in a row.
Yep.
Mine's very brief.
Have you been down to the inlet? Are they pumping sand yet?
They were setting up. I haven't seen
Still
it pumping
setting
yet.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's supposed to be some rough seas this weekend. Yeah.
Mine's just very brief. I just want to thank Tom Houghton and Peter Gaudiello. The cupola, which was purple for National Recovery Month last month, is pink this month for breast cancer awareness.
Okay. All right, so,
And it is off by 10 o'clock.
and complies with all the dogs.
Yes.
All right, so, all right, so for executive session, we have, CPF, acquisitions, property acquisitions, as well as, confidential legal, and, are we doing personnel?
No.
No.
Litigation. Wait, so I will make a motion to end our work session and go into executive session on those items.
Second.
All right, seconded by Councilman Bouvier, all in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.